Hello. So today I'm going to be talking about the something I notice within our world system and how things work. How I notice that each entity in the system is individual, is its own, let's say, system, our own company, our own entity, our own institution, its own thing with its own rules and own presentation. One example that I have seen is with credit cards. Each credit card company is their own company, whether it's Bank of America or Chase or Wells Fargo, which a lot of these are banks, So you have all these different companies. American Express, which is a credit card company. They all have their own different rules, their own presentation, their own thing. And yes, there is some federal law that of the United States that make them have to do certain things because that's the federal law. But besides that, they have their own institution, their own company. They make their own decision of whether they approve you for credit or not. The same thing with countries. Each country is its own country with its own rules, its own laws, its own constitution. And if you break laws in one country, if you go to another country, it's different. The same thing in the United States. The United States is so big, so freaking big, and each state has its own power. If you break a law in one state and go to another state, there isn't this unified, cohesive entity or existence that is throughout, really. I mean, you have the federal government of the United States, that's its own government. It has its own power, its own departments and things, but still you have the power of the states. And once you realize this in the system, like all these different players, it's all these different entities, all these different games going on, then you understand, okay, well, I can play the game then. I can make an argument. I can, let's say, break the law in one place and go somewhere else, for example. Like how Edward Snowden, when he broke, let's say, the laws of the United States, he just left and he found, let's say, refuge in Russia. And, it's like this whole thing where the world is very separated and fragmented in different pieces with its own, like, let's say, political entities and warring factions. And, like, you see that in various different countries where in history, like recently I was looking at the history of China, how China became the government it is today of the People's Republic of China. There was, in the 1930s, 1920s, around that time of World War I and II, you have this whole factions developing of the nationalist movement of China, and then the communist group, People's Republic of China, and they have their own, like, let's say, disagreement. I don't even know what the disagreement was about. I just know that these two entities, movements, they were fighting. It was a war. Literally millions of people were dying. And by the end of it, and then the communists won, let's say, the war, and how even Stalin didn't want Mao to win. Mao was the leader for the Communist Party in China, the Communist movement. And so even then you have these like warring factions or warring people, like conflict, disagreements, where Stalin, which was the communist, let's say, leader in Russia or Soviet Union, sorry, where it's like you have this whole, this whole thing going on. And so within each place, they have their own ideas, their own whatever, stuff like that. So the point here is looking at how this world is so fragmented and how there isn't this point of what is best for all, because as soon as I saw that, okay, well, everything is kind of fragmented, for example, let's say hospital records. Hospitals in one place aren't going to share their records to another place. So here you have like thousands of hospitals who have their own different records of you if you go there, and they don't. There's not a sharing of your health record across all hospitals. I mean, that would be ideal in a way of having your medical history fixed, but it's not like that. You could even show up at a hospital, get treated, leave, the state, and if they can't track you, they can't track you. Or same thing if you leave the country, where yes, you have agreements among countries when it comes to wanting to get certain criminals that left, for example. And then there's that diplomatic agreement, but there's no necessity per se, that it has to be that way. And so anyway, the first instinct I have when I say, okay, well, everything's kind of fragmented like this is to take advantage. Like, okay, I can try to do this to take advantage, because when you play other people against each other, you can win. And that's how, and that first instinct is the instinct of man, is what we are doing already. The millionaires, the billionaires, the people who have all this power, they just play the game. They put other sides against each other, and you win. You find ways to cheat the system, loopholes. That's what people are doing by moving their money outside a country so that they can hide it and not pay taxes. And it's always been like this since forever, really. Whenever had an empire, let's say the Holy Roman Empire, you can leave the empire, you can go to a different place. And so, people can say this is good or bad or whatever, but that instinct of taking advantage, it's not best for all. And if we were unified and lived the point of what's best for all, then it is good. There, of course, is that fear there of having a one world government, a one world system, the fear of being taken advantage of being controlled. And if we look at this point, we inherently, instinctively want to take advantage and abuse. Imagine if all this abuse wouldn't have been occurring. Right now you have companies that are buying products of cocoa from certain African countries where they're using child labor secretly, of course. They kidnap children to work for them in the fields. You have child prostitutes, people who are forced into sex slavery, people who are abducted, even in the United States, and they're taken into human trafficking. And part of the reasons why all these things happen, whether it's, let's say, a legal company going to another country, let's say somewhere in South America, trying to take advantage, or let's say in Africa or in Asia, trying to take advantage of the population, the lack of education, to extract resources, maybe palm oil, very cheaply, very quickly, very dirty. Or maybe a local company does it, or a local warlord or whoever does that setup, and then they sell their products to a company. And of course, you don't want to ask questions about where this palm oil is coming from, or where this product is coming from, or why is this so cheap? And this system is the one that we have to take advantage. No one's looking. There's no one going to punish you, so why would you? That's the instinct. That's the human instinct. That is part of the problem. Then within all of us, humanity, that is our sins of the Father, we could say. That is the nature we have to change. That is who we are right now, as humanity, as all of us, as one, as equal. That's what we're doing. So we have to change this point, and being unified, being accountable, standing as one and equal at that point is taking responsibility, is part of the solution. This idea of fear, I mean, of a one world government or being surveillanced, that's because we fear letting go of that point of being able to escape and not face the reality. The reality of this world is no one's held accountable, really. There's so many loopholes, and we've created a society in like the Western world, Europe, United States, where we believe we have justice, we believe it's a fair system, and we are hardworking people, and we earn the money we make. When the truth is, how come these countries, these places, have all this wealth and have all this power in the first place? Why is it really? We're not producing our own products. Look at everything we import. Look at where all our resources are coming from. If we track down the history and the places these things coming from, are we paying well? These countries, United States, Europe, they've developed a system, economic system, that's very old, that already put them at the very top when the other countries entered into the stage. And it's all based on abuse and control, based on currency. If, for example, let's say, whether it's China, whether it's South Africa or South America, if they decide that their currency is worth more than, let's say, United States dollar, if they make that decision, then it is worth more, isn't it? If they don't agree to that transfer of currency, if they control their currency and make it so that it is equalizing the fact it's equal, I mean, then what can you do? It's part of the reason why things aren't flowing. It's because there is so much capital and infrastructure and education that is within, let's say, Europe, United States. Capital like the machinery, capital like the roads, capital like all these different things that enable that wealth to really sit and accumulate relative to other countries. Funny thing is that as this world has progressed over the years, you have the world market, and you have countries that either don't produce enough food for themselves, or they produce enough food but they sell their food to other countries, let's say like Europe and the United States. And then even though they have people that can't really afford to eat, or they eat very poorly, that's considered smart because at least that company that's producing the food is making money. And so we have this point of, let's say, corruption, where we basically have very wealthy warlords or corrupt politicians who are getting paid or making a lot of money in these countries in order to keep the natural resources fixed and sold to their friends in Europe or United States for very cheap. And China is trying to develop their economy through, yes, using their citizens, through this idea that sacrifice is worth it, that this is how they're going to progress onto the world stage and take control. And in the end, someone has to do something, because with the destructions of the forest, with the pollution, with the complete imbalance and the complete abuse, the world cannot stand. What if all the world markets were to end? Right now, what's keeping it alive is just pure survival, staying alive. There's only so much that people can take. We are not a society based on benevolence and compassion and love. We are a society based on the iron fist ruling and demanding the control of money. Money that isn't even real, just an idea.